Do you know what it feels like to sit at your own kitchen table and feel like a guest in your own home? To watch your son pour himself a glass of your orange juice, hand the remote to his wife, and walk past you without a single word, as though the woman who raised him is nothing more than a piece of furniture they haven't gotten around to throwing out yet? I do. And I spent far too many years pretending I didn't notice. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 74 years old, and I used to live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in a house I bought with my own 2 hands after 31 years of nursing. Before I tell you what happened, I'd like to know where you're watching from. It helps knowing there are people out there listening, because for a long time, I believed no one was. Let me take you back to the beginning. It started the way most slow disasters do, quietly, with a reasonable explanation. My son, Derek, called me on a Tuesday evening 3 years ago. His voice had that particular softness he only used when he wanted something. "Mom," he said, "things are a little tight right now. Sharon and I were wondering if we could stay with you for a couple of months, just until we get back on our feet." 2 months. That was what he said. 2 months. I want you to understand something about Derek. He is my only child, and I loved him the way mothers love their only children completely, sometimes blindly, always at great personal cost. When his father left us, Derek was 9 years old. I worked double shifts at Street, Joseph's, to keep the lights on and food in the refrigerator. I ironed his uniform every morning before he woke up, so he would never feel like he had less than the other boys. I went without a winter coat 2 years running so he could go on the school ski trip. I told myself it was love. I still believe that. But love, I've learned, does not guarantee loyalty. So when he called asking for 2 months, I said yes. Of course I said yes. What mother wouldn't? Sharon arrived with 17 boxes, a treadmill, and an attitude she didn't bother to hide for long. She was pleasant enough at first, the way people are pleasant when they still need something from you. She smiled, complimented my kitchen, asked if she could rearrange the pantry for efficiency. I let her. I told myself it was temporary. The 2 months stretched into 6, then a year, then 2, then 3. Somewhere along the way, without any conversation I can point to, my home stopped being mine. Sharon took over the master bedroom because, she said, the smaller room hurt her back. My things were moved into the guest room with a cheerfulness that made my teeth ache. The refrigerator filled with their food, their brands, their preferences. Derek started having his friends over on Friday nights, and I would lie in the guest room listening to them laugh and wonder what exactly had happened to my life. I used a cane by then. A bad fall in the hospital 2 years before I retired had done something to my left hip that no amount of physical therapy ever fully fixed. I walked slowly. I tired easily. And I watched the way Derek and Sharon watched me, not with concern, not with care, but with the patient calculation of people doing arithmetic in their heads. I was not unaware. I want to make that clear. I saw exactly what was happening. But there is a particular kind of grief that comes from knowing your own child sees you as an obstacle to his inheritance, and I was still in the thick of grieving it. My granddaughter, Lily, was the only bright spot. She is 16, Derek's daughter from his first marriage, and she spent every other weekend with us by court order, though she would have come more often if her father had let her. Lily had her mother's dark eyes and something fierce behind them that reminded me of myself at that age. She was the one who noticed things. The one who would come sit beside me quietly and say, "Grandma, you don't look okay. Are you okay?" I always told her I was fine. Children shouldn't carry the weight of their grandparents' heartbreak. It was Lily who first told me about the calendar. She had come over on a Saturday morning in March, and while Sharon was at her spin class and Derek was playing golf on my tab, with a credit card I'd added him to years ago when things were tight and never removed, Lily sat across from me at the kitchen table with a cup of cocoa and a look on her face that I recognized immediately. "Grandma," she said carefully, "I heard Dad on the phone last night." She paused, pressing her palms flat against the table. "He was talking to someone about the house, about how long you'd probably..." She stopped. Her chin wobbled just slightly. "He said he thought you had maybe 2 years left before things got too bad for you to manage, and that they needed to make sure everything was set up by then." I set down my coffee cup very slowly. He said they were going to take you to the doctor next month and see about getting she lowered her voice power of attorney. I sat with that for a moment. The kitchen smelled like the lavender dish soap I'd been buying for 20 years. The hummingbird feeder I'd hung outside the window in 1987 was still there, catching the morning light. I had chosen every single thing in this room. I had sanded these floors. I had painted these walls twice. "Thank you for telling me," I said. My voice was very steady. I was proud of that. Lily's eyes filled. "I'm sorry, Grandma." "Don't be sorry." I reached across and covered her hand with mine. "You did exactly the right thing." That night, after Lily had gone home and Derek and Sharon were watching television with the volume high enough to rattle the windows, I sat in the guest room in my own home, in the guest room, and I thought about everything. I thought about the 31 years on my feet on hospital floors. I thought about the overtime Christmases and the missed vacations and the retirement account I had built dollar by dollar. I thought about the way Derek had sighed last week when I asked him to please not park in my spot in the driveway, as though my request were an inconvenience too great to bear. And then I stopped thinking about the past entirely, because I realized very clearly that the past was exactly where they expected me to stay. I didn't sleep much that night, but I wasn't sad. I was awake in the particular way that comes when something has finally clicked into place, when the thing you've been afraid to name is suddenly named, and the naming of it removes the fear entirely. My late husband, Robert, had a saying. He would put his big hands around a cup of coffee in the morning and say, "Maggie, the best move is always the one they don't see coming." He died 11 years ago, and I still miss him every single day. But that night, his voice was so clear in my head, it felt like he was sitting right across from me. The best move is always the one they don't see coming. I called my attorney first thing Monday morning. His name is Howard Bellman, and I had known him for nearly 20 years through Robert. He had a calm, measured way of speaking that I had always found grounding. When I told him what Lily had overheard and what I suspected, he did not express shock. Attorneys who've been practicing for 30 years are rarely shocked by anything. "Margaret," he said, "what would you like to do?" I took a breath. "I want to make sure there is nothing left for them to circle around," I said. "I want the house transferred into a trust. I want Lily as the primary beneficiary. I want the joint account closed and the credit card removed. And I want all of it done before they have any idea it's happening." A pause. "Can you come in Wednesday?" "I'll be there Tuesday," I said. I didn't tell Derek I was going. I told him I had a hair appointment and asked if he could be home by noon in case I needed a ride back. He said, "Sure, Mom," without looking up from his phone. Sharon didn't look up at all. Howard's office was downtown on the 4th floor of a building with tall windows and a view of the Sandia Mountains. I had been there for estate planning when Robert died, and walking in felt like stepping into a place that remembered me accurately as a woman with agency, with property, with a mind intact, and a life that was entirely her own. I laid out everything: the account statements, the deed, the credit card records, the notes I had started keeping 3 weeks earlier, dates, comments, small incidents that would mean nothing alone, but together told a very complete story. Howard reviewed everything with the careful, unhurried attention of a man who understood exactly what was at stake. He asked questions. I answered them. At the end of an hour, he looked at me over the top of his glasses and said, "You are absolutely within your rights on every count." "I know," I said. He smiled then, just slightly. "Let's get it done." By the time I left his office that afternoon, the wheels were in motion. The deed transfer was being prepared. The trust was being drafted with Lily named as sole heir to the property and a portion of my savings. A second portion was designated for the children's wing of St. Joseph's Hospital in Robert's name. The credit card shared with Derek was being canceled. The joint checking account, which I had been foolish enough to add him to during a year when he claimed to be struggling, would be closed within 48 hours. I walked out into the Albuquerque afternoon, the March sun warm on my face, the sandias pink and still. I gripped my cane and I breathed slowly, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. The feeling of being in charge of my own life. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing quietly, not dramatically. I did not want scenes. I did not want confrontations before I was ready. I moved carefully, methodically, the way I had learned to do things in a busy ER, one step, then the next, no wasted motion. Each morning while Derek and Sharon slept in my master bedroom, in my house I would sit at the kitchen table early with my coffee and my notepad and work through the list. I called the utility company and had the account transferred back to my name only. I contacted the insurance provider. I organized the papers in the file cabinet in my bedroom, the one I had quietly put a new lock on after Lily's warning. I also began, very discreetly, to look at other options. A friend of mine from the hospital, Patricia, had moved 2 years ago to a 55-plus community in Rio Rancho, about 20 minutes away. She called it the best decision she'd ever made. Her own kitchen, her own parking spot, neighbors who actually knocked before entering. I called her on a Wednesday. "Patty," I said, "tell me about that place again." She told me everything. I took notes. I made an appointment to visit the following Saturday, when Derek and Sharon were driving to Santa Fe for the weekend on the credit card they believed still worked. The apartment in Rio Rancho was small, but it was mine. 1 bedroom, a patio with a view of the high desert, a kitchen I could arrange exactly as I liked. The property manager, a woman named Celia, showed me around with a no-nonsense efficiency I appreciated. She didn't ask about my circumstances. She only asked if I had any questions. I had one. "When's the earliest I could move in?" She said the 1st of April. I wrote the deposit check before I left. I want you to understand that I did not do any of this from anger. Or rather, not only from anger, I did it because I had spent 3 years watching myself become smaller in my own home, and I had finally understood that the only person who was going to stop that was me. My children, my son, had made a calculation. They had looked at my cane and my age and my loneliness and decided I was manageable, that I would be grateful for their company and too afraid of being alone to rock the boat. They were wrong on both counts. The 1st of April was a Tuesday. Derek had a standing work meeting downtown. Sharon taught a yoga class on Tuesday mornings. I had said nothing, changed nothing, given them no indication that anything was different. I had cooked dinner the night before, the chicken piccata that Derek had loved since childhood. I had sat with them at the table and talked about the weather and nodded when Sharon described a podcast she was listening to and said goodnight at 9 o'clock. The movers arrived at 8 in the morning. I had hired a small crew, 3 quiet men who worked quickly and without comment. My furniture, the pieces that had been mine before Derek and Sharon moved in, the things I actually wanted were loaded in under 3 hours. Robert's armchair, my mother's china cabinet, the hummingbird feeder, carefully taken down and wrapped in newspaper, the file cabinet with the new lock. When the truck pulled away, I stood in the empty guest room for a moment, just stood there. The carpet had a faint indentation where my bed frame had been. I left their things untouched. The treadmill, the 17 boxes worth of Sharon's belongings in my master closet. I left the refrigerator full of their food. I was not petty. I simply left. I locked the front door, dropped a single key through the mail slot, and got in the cab Lily had called for me. She was waiting at the new apartment when I arrived, sitting on the front step with 2 cups of coffee from the place down the road. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. "Grandma," she said, "you actually did it. Did you doubt me?" I asked. She handed me a cup. Never. Not for a second. Derek tried to use the credit card that evening. I know this because Howard called to tell me the charge had been declined a restaurant in Santa Fe $47. I imagined the moment, the small frown, the way he would have checked his phone, assumed it was a technical glitch, tried again. I imagined Sharon's expression when the waiter came back the second time. I slept better that night than I had in years. They came home Sunday evening to a house with half its furniture missing and a key on the entry table. The calls started within minutes. I counted 11 missed calls from Derek before I turned the phone face down and made myself a cup of tea. Lily told me about the voicemails later, reading them to me with a careful, measured voice, the way a doctor reads a difficult diagnosis. First message, Derek. His voice was loud and off balance in the way of a man who does not get told no. "Mom, what is this? What have you done? Call me back right now. This is insane. You're not thinking clearly. Call me." Second message, Sharon. The sharpness in her voice was not even disguised. "Margaret, I don't know what's gotten into you or who put you up to this, but you need to understand that we have rights here. We have been caring for you. We have given up a great deal to be here for you. And this is how you treat us? You're going to hear from our attorney." Lily paused. "Should I keep going?" I looked out at the patio, at the high desert going gold in the afternoon light. "No," I said. "I think I understand the tone." Howard handled their attorney with exactly the efficiency I had expected. There was nothing to contest. The deed had been transferred. The trust was airtight. The joint account had been closed before they had any legal claim to question it. Their attorney, Howard told me, had made a few aggressive noises and then gone quiet. The noises, Howard said, are the sound of a case that doesn't exist. 3 weeks later, Howard called me with one more item of business. I had arranged, at his suggestion, for a formal meeting at his office, a courtesy notification of the estate changes, the kind of thing that is cleaner to do in person with documentation than to let unravel piecemeal through attorneys. Derek and Sharon were invited. Lily was invited. I did not tell them I would be there. They arrived in suits, both of them, Derek in the dark blue one he wore to important occasions, Sharon in a blazer I had never seen before. Their faces were composed into expressions of grieved dignity, the particular look of people who believe they are about to receive an apology. Howard greeted them, offered water, settled them into the chairs across from his desk. He told me later that Derek had asked, before they even sat down, whether the trust could be challenged. Howard had said they were about to discuss the estate documents in full. Derek had nodded, satisfied, as though he already knew the ending of the story. He did not know the ending of the story. Howard opened the folder. He read the documents clearly, and without pause, his voice the same unhurried instrument it always was. The house at 1142 Cottonwood Drive transferred in full to a trust with sole beneficiary status belonging to Lily Marie Hayes. A portion of Margaret Hayes' savings directed to the pediatric wing of St. Joseph's Hospital in memory of Robert James Hayes. All joint financial instruments closed as of March 19th. Sharon's composure cracked first. She looked at Derek. Derek looked at Howard. His jaw had gone tight. This is he started. And then the door opened. I had asked Celia to drive me. I walked in with my cane, and I will tell you honestly that the walk from the door to the chair felt longer than any hallway I had ever crossed, including the ones in 31 years of nursing. But I made it. I sat down in the chair Howard had placed beside his desk. I folded my hands on top of my cane. The room was very quiet. Derek's face had gone the particular color of a man who has been embarrassed deeply and knows there is no recovering from it. Sharon stared at me as though I had done something inexplicable, as though the mere fact of my being alive and present was a violation of some agreement she believed we had. Lily sat in the corner. She was very still. Her eyes met mine, and she gave me a single small nod. I looked at my son. He opened his mouth. "Mom," he said. I held up one hand, the same hand that had held his when he was small, that had pressed cold cloths to his forehead through every childhood fever, that had signed every permission slip and check and document his life had ever required. "I'm going to say what I need to say," I told him, "and I'm going to ask you to let me finish." He closed his mouth. I said, "You came to me 3 years ago and asked for 2 months. I gave you 3 years. I gave you my bedroom, my credit card, my grocery budget, my driveway. I cooked your dinners. I stayed quiet when I was treated like someone who was in the way. I watched the way you and your wife looked at this house, and I understood very clearly what you were waiting for." I paused. My voice was not shaking. I want to tell you that very specifically. My voice was not shaking. "What you forgot," I said, "is that I was a nurse for 31 years. I have watched people die gracefully, and I have watched people die badly, and I know the difference. What I will not do is let you manage my decline as though it were a project you've been assigned. This is my life. These are my assets. And I am still, very much, the one in charge of them." Sharon started to speak. Derek touched her arm and she stopped. I continued, "You will find the house as you left it, minus the furniture that was mine before you arrived. You have 30 days to make other arrangements. Howard has the details." Another silence. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked. Derek looked at me then, and for just a moment I saw something cross his face that might have been shame. It was brief. It didn't last, but it was there. "Mom," he said quietly, "we're your family." I nodded. "You are," I said, "and I love you. But love without respect is just habit, and I'm too old to keep up habits that cost me everything." I stood. It took a moment. The hip always takes a moment, but I stood. Lily appeared at my elbow before I had to ask. Together, we walked out of that office and into the New Mexico afternoon. The sky that particular deep blue that only exists at altitude. The air clear and dry and full of the smell of cedar. Lily slipped her arm through mine as we went down the steps. She didn't say anything right away. We walked to the car and she helped me in, and then we drove for a while without speaking, the Sandias out the window going violet in the early evening light. Finally, she said, soft and careful, "Do you regret it?" I thought about the guest room with its indented carpet. I thought about the credit card declined in Santa Fe. I thought about Sharon's face in Howard's office, the particular blankness of someone whose plan has stopped working. And then I thought about the patio in Rio Rancho, and the hummingbird feeder I had hung outside the window the first morning, and the way the light came in at 8 o'clock and fell across the kitchen floor in a long, warm stripe that was entirely, completely mine. "Not for a single moment," I said. Lily squeezed my hand. The weeks that followed were quieter than I had expected. Derek sent 2 more messages, less angry than the first, more resigned. He did not ask for forgiveness. I did not offer it. Some doors, once you understand why they need to close, you do not reopen. They found an apartment within the 30 days. Howard handled the handover of the keys with his usual brisk efficiency. He called to tell me it was done, and I thanked him and made myself a cup of coffee and sat on my patio and watched 2 sparrows argue over the edge of the birdbath I had set out the week before. Lily comes on Saturdays now. She takes the bus from her mother's house and arrives at 10 in the morning with her backpack and sometimes a box of pastries from the bakery on 4th Street. We sit together at my kitchen table, in my kitchen, in my home, and she tells me about school and her friends and the novel she is writing. She has been writing it since she was 14. I have read every draft. Last Saturday, she looked up from her notebook and said, "Grandma, do you ever miss how things used to be, before all of it?" I thought about the answer honestly, the way I have always tried to think about honest things. "I miss your grandfather every day," I told her. "I miss being young enough that my hip didn't remind me it exists every morning. I miss a version of your father I think existed when he was 9 years old and still believed I was the most capable person in the world." I told her all of that. And then I said, "But I don't miss being afraid. I don't miss lying awake in that guest room, wondering what would happen to my house, my money, my dignity. I don't miss the version of me that kept quiet because she thought keeping quiet was the price of not being alone." Lily looked at me for a long moment. She is 16 and she has her whole life ahead of her, all its complications and heartbreaks and unexpected reversals, and I hope she is paying close attention. "That's the version of you they made a mistake about," she said finally. "Yes," I told her. "It was. I still use the cane. My hip is what it is, and at 74 I've stopped expecting it to be otherwise, but I walk with it differently now. I notice that. It is not a concession to weakness. It is just a cane, a tool, a piece of equipment that helps me do what I want to do. I do not apologize for it. I do not pretend it isn't there. Some mornings, I sit on the patio very early, before the heat comes up, and I watch the light change over the desert. The hummingbirds have found the feeder. There is one with a red throat that arrives at 7:15 with a reliability that I find genuinely comforting. He doesn't know anything about estate transfers or difficult sons or 31 years of overtime shifts. He simply arrives, drinks, departs, comes back the next day. Does the whole thing again? I find I have a great deal of respect for that. People ask me sometimes, or I imagine they might ask me, whether I think I did the right thing, whether it was too harsh, whether a mother ought to be more forgiving, more patient, more willing to absorb whatever her children require of her in the name of family. I have thought about this question carefully because I think it deserves a careful answer. What I did was not cruelty. It was not revenge, though I understand why it might look that way from the outside. What I did was simply refuse to participate in a story that someone else was writing for me. A story in which I was the fading, dependent, irrelevant chapter before the real inheritance began. I have written my own ending instead. It is quieter than I expected. It involves sparrows and good coffee and a 16-year-old girl who comes on Saturdays and the slow, enormous satisfaction of knowing that every single thing in my home is there because I chose it. It is, without question, enough. So wherever you are watching from, whether you are a woman like me, further along in life than you planned, wondering whether it is too late to take back what's yours, I want you to hear this. It is not too late. It is never too late. The people who have underestimated you are counting on you to believe that it is. Don't give them the satisfaction. This is my story. Not a story of forgiveness, because forgiveness is something earned, and some people never do the earning, but a story of reclamation, of a woman who remembered, at 74, that her life still belonged entirely to her. And that, as it turns out, is everything.